It's hard not to begin with probably the most highly praised building, new building in New York in a long time, the LVMH Tower. Tell me about how it began. Bernard Arnault, a well-known corporate executive in charge of a company that has to do with style and elegance and luxury goods, wants a showplace in New York City on 57th Street. A reasonably small site. You end up with a building that everybody talks about. Stone, light, it seems almost to be reaching for the sky. Tell me about the beginnings for you.
Firstly, in I think something like the middle of 94, February maybe, or March 94, some people from Vuitton came in my office.
A company now owned by LVMH.
Owned by LVMH. And I met Yves Carcel, the president of Vuitton, and they explained me that Bernard Arnault and them and LVMH and Vuitton would be wishing to make what they called a starship building.
A starship building.
Starship building in a little place on 57. And at this occasion, they would like to have a new store for Vuitton. So I began. I firstly didn't believe really, even my friend architect in New York don't have occasion to build in New York. So for a French, it's just a dream. We all of us consider New York and Manhattan as the myth, the city of the 20th century, but it's a place you don't have any chance to build. But time to time they came, and in September they said, let's go, we take the Concorde, and then suddenly I was in front of a site, it became real. Then I began to believe in it. And I made some first sketches with probably one main idea, what could be a starship building in front of such a big building than the IBM Tower.
Across the street.
Across the street, which is so tall and which is rather dark. And I understood if I would do a glass building, only glass, it would be a mirror of the IBM. You would just see the IBM on it. Secondly, there was, under construction beginning, the Chanel building beside. So it was a problem. Of course, it would not be possible to make just a twin of the Chanel.
Chanel, as they say in America.
Chanel.
Yeah.
So the site was about the same size. So if I follow quietly the zoning code, I would have the same right and the same recess line to apply. So I would just make a volume exactly the same and choosing another stone and another glass. But it's nothing to make a starship building to have two twins,
Yes.
So I had a very special problem to make something different, but something which would not be an extraordinary bottle that you would consider like a joke, and after 3 months would not belong Manhattan. So I began to work with that. The first thing were a bit strange, and then I discovered that the zoning code of Manhattan is very interesting, that you have the right to do some hollows, and slowly I arrived to break this idea of recess. You have the right that the big building would be present on a certain recess line only on one point. This was the main thing I start from that. And I think I succeeded to have something which has a great vertical unity, follows the zoning code, and I used very special transparent glass. We call that low iron glass. Yeah. This is the same glass that AMP used for the pyramid in the Louvre. and I sanded it, which makes this color very white silver. And this glass is very interesting because it softened a lot the reflection from the IBM. And the fact also that I used not a plane but oblique geometry also broke this reflection. And then the building, I made cardboard model, but I explained to Bernard Arnault, this will break the reflection and the building will exist by itself, really. And he said, it will be very different from Chanel. And I am happy because it is bigger than Chanel. Because I make this hollow, then I had more area that I could build higher.
Yes.
So the building is a bit higher. And it was lefting over some volumes, and then I proposed this magic room up on the top.
Okay. As you talk, this is your building here.
Yes.
And this is Chanel.
Exactly.
Chanel, you know. IBM is across the street.
Yes.
As you talk about this.
Exactly.
Most or many of the best architects in America have been on this program. Many have said to me when I asked, what is your great regret? You know what they say. I never got to build in New York. Few have had a chance to build in New York. In terms of anything special, when you got this assignment, to the great envy and jealousy of architects, certainly in America, but out throughout the world, did you say to yourself, I have to do something unique, historic, of the next century?
It's hard to say. Probably I felt that, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I didn't express that on my
Yes.
room.
But did you
not to felt such a pressure.
Yeah.
I did what I follow my inspiration and the problem I felt. I had the feeling that a new chapter of New York
architecture was beginning with this building?
Architecturally, I wouldn't pretend that this building would be a success before achieving it.
Yeah.
But I had the feeling that some way to perceive the building could be a little bit different. It was a chance.
No.
I felt that, of course.
Look at this. This is the top floor, top 3 floors. It's one room, big room, magic room they call it, the magic room. You can see it.
And you can have a look to Central Park from this place. That's what I said to
What's
them.
the origin of that idea?
It's just because I wanted to make a building as high as possible, and at this 24th floor, it was a maximum area which was buildable, you know. Arriving on this floor,
Yes.
I felt the area legally permitted. But I was explaining that it was possible to use more height. So I said, wouldn't we use the height more and not area? So make a big room there, it's possible. So this came from the difference between the top of the area, the top of the height. It was a difference, and I said, let's do something extraordinary on top. So they were enthusiastic with that.
Oh, so it was your idea to make
Yes.
something spectacular
on top.
on top.
Yes.
And they use it for receptions and
They are very happy. It's used every day almost now. It's
every day almost,
Yes.
yeah. Here is another view of the building this is from east of the building.
Yes, it's from Madison. It's from Madison.
Yeah, so the building's between Madison and 5th.
Yes, exactly.
And this is from Madison, and here is the Chanel building, and this is the other building. And it shows you how remarkable it squeezes in there, and then...
Yes. And you can see that the reflection of IBM is not really present here,
Yeah.
but it's very strong here. And
Right.
here is normal glass.
Yeah.
I use this very special glass only on the wrapped part, you know.
And this part is normal glass.
Yes, so you can see how it would have been if I used normal glass everywhere. It would just be a dark mirror.
How do you feel about this building now that it's finished, now that the critics have had their say, and now that the client is in the building?
Of course, it's a great happiness. I wouldn't think that the reception, the welcoming in New York would be so strong. and it was a very strong and praised reception, welcome, also from my friend architect in New York. Over any kind of jealousy or envy, they told me, this is really great. Maybe this is the first step to have the chance to make other things.
Yeah.
So this is something very, I would not believe in that before, of course.
Yeah. Because in 1994, when you won the Pritzker Prize, the highest award in architecture, Herbert Mouchon, as you know, wrote about you and saying, why now?
Yes, exactly.
Everybody would understand if you got the Pritzker Prize after this building.
Yes.
But you got it before.
Before.
And then Mouchon wrote at 94, why now?
Mm-hmm.
What's he done? Mm-hmm. And yet now Mouchon says about your building, stunning, extraordinary.
I think it's perfectly understandable. In 94, I was probably the younger Pritzker Prize. It was very.
You were the youngest at the time, and
think,
still are.
I think so.
Yeah.
And it was. My work was not very known in the United States, so it's perfectly understandable that they could have some question about. And many other architects would have deserved it before me at this moment. So it was a first thing of my generation. Since this year, Rem Koolhaas, which is the same age as me, got it, but before Tadawando got it. So our generation now is present in this.
A new generation of architects rising.
Yes.
Rem Koolhaas won the Pritzker
this
past year. This was your most famous building, probably, before the LVMH building. Yeah, Cité de la Musique. Yeah. Tell me about that.
It's a very rich program about music, museum, concert hall, rehearsal hall, every kind of meeting room. And I did that like a strange new village which welcome people which come to discover music. The program is very open. It goes from Baroque to jazz to modern to world music. It's changing every week. And I did a concert hall which is adapted to any kind of music, which is an elliptic hall. And the concert hall by itself is very new in its shape, and it appears it is very good for acoustic also.
We are sitting in a cafe in Paris. Here is what it looks like downstairs.
So this picture is from 14 or 13 years ago. It became after 6 months or 1 year.
So about 1987.
Exactly. And it took 2 or 3 months to get a very important random place in Paris.
Important
place
site
in Paris. Here was nothing before. It was 4 little old buildings. I joined them, and it became very interesting.
Having received all the accolades for the LVMH Tower in New York, what kinds of things most attract you? Most architects I know love doing museums. They seem to be the signature. Frank Gehry, Bilbao. The redesign of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. You look at different places around the world. You were very close to winning a commission in Kansas City. What do you want to do?
Of course, I would love to do some museum. I did a little one in Paris. It's an extension of the Bourdelle Museum, the French sculptor, the same period than Rodin. And many people told me this is maybe what I did the best. It's little, it's in Montparnasse. because of the use of the light, and I work on every sculpture to find the right place. So it's something very interesting. Museum could be like what have been the churches or the cathedral in the other centuries. But I would say also that I've been asked many times in shortlist for selection committee for some museum in the United States. Nothing, not on them worked out. I did an interesting project for the extension of Nelson Atkins in Kansas City.
Yes.
That Stephen Hall won. Maybe it might be that some days I would like to do one, but I would say the program is, for me, the thing I like in this job is the variety of program. It's a new adventure. A new program is something new. The client, the people you are working for or with are new also. And the place, the city, is also something new. I did some project for Prague, for Tokyo, and for Amsterdam, and Milano, and Paris. And every time it's a new culture. And this is very
rich. A new culture.
It's a new urban culture. Yeah. You have to understand, you have to feel that you respond a program, you respond a client, and you respond also a place. So all of that is so interesting that the program by itself could be offices, a dwelling, and corporate building or museum. Of course, it's extraordinary, and you can express something. And I think what did Frank Gehry in Bilbao is stunning for everybody. It's a building which transforms also completely the city. It gives a new sense to Bilbao. It's really not only inside but outside, yeah. And urbanistically it's working.
It shows the power and impact of a powerful building.
Exactly.
You know, in terms of shaping the aesthetic and the perception of a place. Mm-hmm. What has shaped you as an architect? What architects, what ideas, what artists have influenced you?
It's funny because I wouldn't say when I began to have the idea to be an architect, it was because I have discovered drawings of Le Corbusier. I was 14 years old, yeah. I was painting, and suddenly I've seen in a book hand drawing for Chandigarh, the city in India. Yeah. And I said, this is the thing. It exists, architecture. Then I realized that I was liking to travel and to make little sketches of old cities, but this is the thing. And after years and years, I would say I discovered other influence of architect and artist. You know, it's not only architect. Yeah. And I would say something. I'm very in relation with artists or architects who are asking them a new question after years, in different epochs. And I think about Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yes.
He's fantastic. He began in the 19th century. In the 50s, he's doing the Guggenheim in New York. It's an extraordinary root of what has been the modernism in the 20th century. And I think this is an example because he has been moving and always being himself and being on the point of discovering the new epoch at each moment, beginning of the 20th century, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. Picasso also has been doing changing all the time. And I think it's very interesting. I admire artists which have their own expression, always the same also, but it's not me. Yeah. This is something. And I would say also that an architect is not exactly a painter or a sculptor. I said Picasso, but I think something is very special with architecture. It's not an absolute art. It serves the people. It serves to make the life better. Yeah. So it's somewhere there is a sort of a modesty of the attitude of an architect. Before all, it has to serve. After that, it could rise a very high expression, artistic expression, but before all, it has to serve.
Do you think computer graphics and technology is changing the face of architecture?
Definitely. It's very important. And I use, and we use in the workshop at the same level. I begin with some sketches or model, but at the same time, we use modeling in computer.
Right.
And it's not the same use, but it improves very strongly the way we have the regard. It makes that we are going faster. And some parts, some shape I done for new project, even for the Palais de la Porte-Maillot, some shape we have done, we would not have been able to do without this computer, because it was too complicated to calculate. And sometimes the graphic discs that we do are used immediately by machine who cut some form used for the building. We are saving 1 year of drawing with huge table to make this execution drawing, sometime by computer. So it's open completely. But it's also a way to imagine new relation with space and form, which will be open. So it's very important. The only thing is we have not to be trapped by it.
Yes.
We have to take care that with computer you can forget the real dimension, for instance. You can make some mistake with the scale. So I still use model, physical model and computer model. Maybe it's a bit heavy, but the models are very useful to communicate with people and clients also.
Christian De Portzamparc, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you on this broadcast. I look forward to seeing the building with you in person in New York.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.